Imagine a battlefield where thousands march with thunder in their boots while one lone soldier stands in the smoke and decides that courage will not bow to numbers. This is the story of how a single mind sharper than steel outsmarted an entire battalion and changed the fate of a war. In every war, history remembers the armies, the tanks, the machines, the explosions, but sometimes history forgets the silent shadows, the single individuals who stood alone against a storm and managed to turn the impossible into the unforgettable. Today we walk into the torn soil of a battlefield where one soldier carried not the weight of fear but the weight of responsibility and made a choice that would haunt enemies for generations. This soldier was not the strongest, not the tallest, not the most decorated, yet he carried something far more powerful, a mind that understood the terrain, the weather, the silence, the heartbeat of danger, and the rhythm of survival. This is not a story born from myth. This is not a tale twisted by time. This is the pure, raw journey of a single soldier who used strategy instead of bullets and turned intelligence into a weapon more dangerous than any rifle he ever held. The night was darker than ink, clouds swallowing the moon, cold wind crawling through the trees. The forest was silent except for distant marching boots. The enemy battalion was moving like a beast made of metal and men, hundreds strong, each trained, each armed, each ready to crush anything in their path. They believed nothing could stop them. They believed they would roll through the valley like a wave of iron, but in their path stood one man, a soldier separated from his unit, cut off by chaos, forced into the wilderness with nothing but his training, his instincts, and the knowledge that the enemy would soon arrive. The soldier knew that fighting head on was death. He knew that running would doom nearby villages. He knew the only way out was to think deeper, think smarter, think faster than an entire battalion. He began by studying the terrain, the hill slopes, the broken branches, the river that sliced the valley, the old abandoned watchtower, the scattered stones that whispered past battles. He understood that every tree could be a shield, every shadow a disguise, every sound a signal. He moved like a ghost, stepping where leaves would not crack, sliding where the moonlight would not reveal his shape. He knew he could not fire a single shot until it mattered. He needed confusion, fear, hesitation in the mind of the enemy. A battalion can crush a man, but a confused battalion can collapse from within. The soldier found an old bunker half buried in dirt, the kind left behind by wars long forgotten. He climbed inside and discovered rusted lanterns, cracked crates, scraps of rope and metal pieces, and he saw opportunity. He took the metal shards and hung them on branches thin enough to sway in the wind. He stretched the rope across narrow paths hidden by bushes. He placed broken crates where footsteps would snap and echo like gunfire. He transformed silence into a maze of illusions. He turned the forest into a trap of sound. Every gust of wind would create noise. Every movement would create confusion. Every echo would seem like a threat from nowhere. As the first squad of the battalion entered the valley, they marched with confidence, but that confidence cracked when the wind blew and metal clanged. They froze, thinking they were surrounded. Shadows danced, trees swayed, but to tense soldiers everything looked like movement. They signaled others to halt, weapons raised, hearts pounding, fear sliding into their discipline. The soldier watched from above, hidden in branches, eyes fixed on every reaction. He knew this was only the beginning. He moved again toward the river, tying logs with rope, arranging them so that when pushed they would drift, making splashes loud enough to sound like soldiers crossing water. He adjusted branches so that they broke with minimal pressure. He placed stones in ways that rolled loudly when kicked. He was painting the battlefield with deception, each trap small, each effect simple, but together they created the illusion of an army waiting in the dark. Hours later, when the battalion advanced deeper, they triggered the first rope. Soldiers tripped, falling hard, weapons clattering, echoing across the valley. Others panicked, Thinking they were under ambush, they fired into the trees, bullets slicing leaves but hitting nothing. The sound of gunfire rolled through the valley, and squads farther behind heard it, believing the front lines were engaged. Chaos spread like wildfire. Voices rose, orders tangled, fear rising within disciplined men, confusion beginning to take command. The lone soldier remained patient. Every second mattered. He studied how the enemy responded. He understood which direction they turned, where their fear grew strongest. Then he struck again, not with bullets but with illusion. He waited for the wind to calm, then threw a stone across the river, sending loud splashes. The battalion panicked, shifting formation, believing an entire unit was flanking them. The commander shouted orders, but soldiers hesitated, afraid to advance, afraid to retreat, afraid of the unseen enemy closing in. The soldier crawled along the ridge, preparing the next phase. He reached the old watchtower, climbing silently inside. At the top he found a rusted signal horn used decades ago. It could no longer call allies, but it could echo across the valley like thunder. He breathed slowly and with a steady motion struck the horn. The blast roared through the darkness, bouncing between hills, multiplying into what sounded like dozens of war horns. The battalion broke into full alarm, shouting, tripping, scrambling to react to threats that did not exist. But the soldier was not done. He lit small dry grass patches, creating tiny controlled fires, smoke rising like signals of movement, flames flickering like silhouettes. This made the enemy believe that troops were spreading around them, surrounding them, cutting off escape routes. The commander ordered retreat to regroup, but retreating required crossing narrow paths now filled with traps. They tripped again, they stumbled again. Panic spiraled, discipline dissolved, fear claimed every man in the battalion. The lone soldier watched the entire retreat from the shadows, but he still had one final move. He waited until the battalion reached the river bank, then pushed the tied logs into the water. The logs drifted, crashing into each other, sounding like boats arriving. Soldiers screamed, believing reinforcements had arrived for the enemy. They abandoned their gear, dropping rifles, running in fear, stumbling over one another. A battalion of trained men undone by a single soldier who never fired a shot until the final moment. As the battalion collapsed in chaos, the soldier finally fired one round, not to kill but to echo across the valley, as if confirming the presence of the phantom army. The shot bounced off stone, amplifying the fear that had already broken the battalion. The commander ordered full retreat, abandoning their advance mission. Derailed, shattered by shadows, wind echoes, traps, and illusion. When the sun rose, the valley that once shook with marching boots stood silent, smoke drifting, traps scattered, footprints everywhere except where the lone soldier stood, calm, steady, watching the horizon. He had no medals pinned to him, no flag draped behind him, only the quiet satisfaction that he had protected lives without spilling unnecessary blood. He had proved that strategy can overpower strength, that intelligence can crush numbers, that one mind can outsmart many, and that courage does not always roar. Sometimes courage is silent, invisible, a shadow in the night that turns a battalion into a frightened herd. This story spread through ranks like wildfire. Soldiers whispered about the ghost of the valley, the man who fought without an army commander studied his tactics. Officers reflected on how a lone soldier rewrote the rules of engagement. Some dismissed it as luck, others as myth, but those who understood the battlefield knew that this soldier represented something far more important: the power of awareness, the power of patience, the power of understanding terrain, psychology, and timing. Through this tale we learn that war is not always won by overwhelming strength. Sometimes it is won by overwhelming intelligence. This soldier showed that even when outnumbered, outgunned, isolated, and alone, a strategically thinking mind can rewrite the outcome of an entire conflict. His actions saved villages, protected flanks, and delayed enemy operations long enough for reinforcements to arrive. His legacy carried far beyond that valley, a reminder that a single spark of brilliance can stop an entire wildfire of destruction. Even years later, military academies would analyze This mysterious night, using it as an example of asymmetric warfare and psychological mastery, commanders would teach cadets how one soldier defeated fear with calmness, how he used the environment to his advantage, how he let the enemy destroy themselves through their own assumptions. His courage became a blueprint, his strategy became a lesson, his silence became a war cry for generations of soldiers to come, and so the legend lives on. Not